The Fort Bragg indoor firing range usually thrummed with a predictable rhythm, a confident pulse of modern firepower and youthful ambition. It was a symphony of precision, optics, rapid-fire bursts, and competitive boasts. The air hung thick with gunpowder and a subtle scent of arrogant self-assurance. Young soldiers, fresh from advanced training, their uniforms crisp, their stances textbook perfect, moved with the effortless confidence of those who believed they held the future of warfare in their hands. They laughed at his old-fashioned shooting. Thomas Hayes, an unassuming figure in faded plaid and a worn cap, a ghost from a war fought with iron and instinct. But when Thomas Hayes pulled the trigger, the sound of the firing range was never the same again. This is the story of a quiet veteran, a master of the forgotten art, who reminded a new generation that true skill is timeless, and sometimes the loudest lessons are learned in the profoundest silence. At 10:15 a.m. on a Wednesday, the range was bustling. A squad of active-duty infantrymen, mostly in their early 20s, occupied the lanes closest to the entrance. Their banter was loud, their energy infectious. Each shot was a declaration, a testament to their prowess. Staff Sergeant Miller, a seasoned NCO with 2 tours under his belt, oversaw their practice, a patient but firm presence. He watched his men with pride, confident in their modern training, their advanced weaponry, their undeniable spirit. The scent of fresh lubricants mixed with burnt powder, creating an almost intoxicating aroma of combat efficiency. The range vibrated with the crack of gunfire, a constant pulsating beat that spoke of power and control. Thomas Hayes entered quietly, as was his custom. He wasn't part of any squad, any official drill. He was simply a registered civilian, a silent patron who favored Lane 7 tucked away in the furthest corner from the main noise, a spot where the echoes were softer, the distractions fewer. He carried his worn range bag low, his gait deliberate, a slight limp, a constant reminder of a distant jungle, a painful echo of a hidden land. He signed the register with his usual unhurried hand. Hayes, no rank, no fuss, no small talk. He was just an old man, a relic in a world obsessed with newness, with speed, with instant gratification. He wore his customary faded plaid shirt, jeans patched at the knee, and the same old army green cap whose brim shaded eyes that missed nothing. His boots were scuffed, but clean, worn smooth from countless miles, civilian and otherwise. He moved to his lane with a quiet dignity that went unnoticed by the younger soldiers. Their world was fast, flashy, immediate, fueled by social media and gaming consoles. His was slow, deliberate, a testament to enduring patience and honed observation. A world shaped by the unforgiving realities of actual combat. They saw an old man, a relic in their high-tech domain. They spoke in acronyms, in gigabytes, in drone altitudes. He spoke in the language of wind and grit, and the subtle shift of terrain, a language they barely understood, a vocabulary of survival etched into his very being. The young soldiers glanced at him briefly, then resumed their lively chatter. Their attention was primarily on their own targets, their own scores, their own friendly rivalries. They watched him unpack his single M1911 pistol, a heavy steel anachronism compared to their lightweight polymer firearms, the glint of its polished metal seeming almost out of place amidst the matte black finishes of their ARs. They saw him load his magazine slowly, deliberately, as if performing an ancient ritual. Each round clicked into place with a quiet authority. They chuckled softly, exchanging knowing glances, a ripple of amusement spreading through their ranks. He was Pops, or Grandpa, a figure of amusement, a harmless eccentric from a forgotten era. He was old school in the most dismissive sense of the term, a quaint reminder of simpler times. Private Jenkins, a cocky young rifleman with a sharp jawline and an even sharper wit, a natural leader of their jovial pack, called out to his buddy Private Rodriguez, his voice carrying easily over the muted pops of their own firearms. Jenkins. "Hey, Rod, check out Grandpa over there. Still using a pistol from before my dad was born. Must be rough on the wrist, huh? Pretty sure that thing kicks like a mule." His tone was laced with a patronizing amusement, a subtle barb aimed at the old man's perceived inadequacy. Rodriguez laughed a loud, booming sound that echoed through the range, his own rifle still smoking from a recent burst. "Maybe he thinks he's fighting the Germans again, Jenkins. Gotta love the classics, right? Just don't pull a muscle, old-timer. We need to make sure he doesn't break a hip out here." Their laughter bounced off the concrete walls, mingling with the crack of their own high-velocity rifles, a symphony of youthful arrogance and casual disrespect born of ignorance and overconfidence. Staff Sergeant Miller heard their banter, a faint frown creasing his brow, but he said nothing. He, too, had dismissed the old man as harmless, a nostalgic hobbyist, more an interesting curiosity than a serious shooter. He had seen plenty of old vets come through the range, seeking a connection to their past. Thomas heard them. He always did. His senses, sharpened by years of combat, picked up every inflection, every subtle shift in tone, every hidden meaning in their words. He felt their condescension, their casual dismissal. It was a familiar feeling, one he had learned to ignore in his pursuit of peace. A profound silence he had cultivated over decades. He didn't flinch, didn't react. His gaze remained fixed on his target, a faded paper silhouette 15 yards downrange, a silent commitment to the task at hand. He loaded his magazine with the same deliberate precision, his movements a silent rebuke to their boisterous mockery, their youthful short-sightedness. He raised the M1911. The heavy steel pistol felt familiar, a comforting weight in his hand, a seamless extension of his will. His stance was textbook perfect, a classic Weaver stance, solid, unwavering, grounded. His feet were spaced just so, his knees slightly bent, his core engaged. His grip was firm, his knuckles slightly white, a testament to years of training and countless rounds. Fired his hands, seemingly fused with the weapon. His arms extended stable as stone, his breathing even controlled. The pistol, heavy and unforgiving, became an instrument of silent destruction, a conductor in a symphony of precision. The first shot was a single soft pop, a muffled thud that seemed almost insignificant amidst the louder crackle of the younger soldiers' modern rifles. It hit the dead center of the target, a small, neat hole right through the bullseye, a tiny tear in the paper. Thomas didn't react, didn't inspect his shot. His focus remained absolute, unwavering. He simply reset his grip, his eyes never leaving the target, a silent promise of what was to come. The young soldiers barely noticed. They continued their rapid-fire bursts, their targets riddled with scattered holes, an acceptable pattern for combat conditions, their focus more on volume than on surgical precision. But then Thomas fired again. Another soft pop, a quiet echo in the overwhelming din. Another perfect bullseye. His movements were fluid, precise, economical, no wasted motion, no exaggerated recoil control, no flashy tactics, just pure, unadulterated skill, a distillation of decades of practice and instinct. Jenkins and Rodriguez paused their own firing. Their loud banter had died down, replaced by a flicker of curiosity, a dawning unease. They'd heard the consistent pops and seen the old man's unwavering stance. Something was off. This wasn't beginner's luck. This was something else, a rhythm, a cadence that spoke of mastery, of a quiet confidence that transcended the noise. Jenkins. "Whoa, hey Rod, did you see that? Dude's stacking them, like he's welding holes together." His voice was a hushed whisper, a genuine surprise replacing his earlier amusement. Rodriguez squinted downrange, then looked at Thomas Hayes again. The old man fired 2 more shots. Pop! Pop! 2 more perfect bullseyes. His target now had 4 holes clustered so tightly they looked like one ragged tear. The pattern was impossibly small, impossibly precise, a testament to a level of accuracy that seemed almost beyond human capability. The laughter died completely in the young soldiers' throats. Their competitive spirit evaporated, replaced by a dawning awe, a profound hush that felt heavier than the gunpowder smoke that hung in the air. Their rifles now silent in their hands, they watched Thomas Hayes with a new chilling fascination, their youthful arrogance crumbling under the weight of his quiet mastery. Staff Sergeant Miller noticed the profound change in his squad. He walked closer, his brow furrowed with curiosity and a growing concern. He had heard the sudden silence. He had seen the stunned faces of his best men. He watched Thomas Hayes fire his last shot from the magazine, a final soft pop. Another bullseye, a perfect complement to the impossibly tight cluster. The old man slowly lowered the M1911, opened the chamber, and ejected the spent casing. His movements were calm, deliberate, almost meditative, a ritual performed with generations of practice. He picked up his spotting scope and aimed it at his target, his hands steady, his focus unwavering. The entire squad of young soldiers gathered behind him, their rifles now silent, their earlier mockery replaced by a chilling fascination and a sense of profound reverence. They peered over his shoulder as Thomas adjusted the scope, revealing his target. The image on the screen was stark, undeniable. Their eyes widened, their jaws dropped. The target, a standard paper silhouette, was riddled with 10 holes, but they weren't scattered. They were all clustered within a single ragged quarter-sized hole, right in the bullseye, a tight, almost surgical grouping. A grouping so tight, so impossibly perfect, that it defied logic. It was a work of art, a testament to a level of precision they had only ever read about in old sniper manuals, whispered about in hushed tones as Myth Rodriguez, voice a hushed whisper filled with awe. "Holy sh! That's impossible! That's a single hole! With that old thing!" Jenkins. "No way! An M1911 at 15 yards! That's goddamn sorcery! He must be some kind of cyborg." His usual cockiness replaced by genuine shock, Staff Sergeant Miller looked at the target, then at Thomas Hayes. The old man's face remained impassive, his eyes calm, betraying no hint of triumph, no flicker of arrogance. His presence a quiet center in the storm of their disbelief. Miller had seen legendary shooters in his time, but nothing like this. This was a different class, a different era of skill, a mastery that seemed almost supernatural. "Miller." "Sir," his voice low, filled with a newfound respect, a tone of genuine deference. What was that? That's unbelievable accuracy. I've never seen anything remotely close to that with an M1911. Thomas slowly lowered his spotting scope and looked at Miller. His eyes held a depth of knowledge, a quiet wisdom that silenced the young NCO's questions. A profound understanding passed between them. "Tommy, just muscle memory, Sergeant. Some things you learn you don't forget." He began to pack his pistol methodically, cleaning it with a worn rag, his movements unhurried, deliberate. The young soldiers watched him in stunned silence, their minds grappling with what they had just witnessed. Their bravado had evaporated, replaced by a profound respect, a dawning realization that they had just seen a living legend, a master of a dying art, a ghost from a time when precision was everything. Jenkins. "Sir, can you show us how you do that? What kind of training is that? Where did you learn to shoot like that?" His voice was eager, almost desperate to learn. Thomas looked at Jenkins, his eyes holding a faint, almost imperceptible sadness, a melancholic glint. Son, that kind of training doesn't come in a manual. It comes from a different kind of war, a different kind of teacher, a teacher that doesn't use whiteboards or simulation rooms. He finished cleaning his pistol, snapped the magazine back in, and placed it gently in its case. He zipped his range bag and slowly rose from his stool. The young soldiers parted, forming a path for him, their silence a stark contrast to their earlier mockery, a profound reverence now in their eyes. Staff Sergeant Miller approached him, his voice deferential. "Sir, my men, they meant no disrespect. They've never seen anything like that. They were completely shocked." Thomas nodded, his gaze distant, a faraway look in his eyes. "I know, Sergeant. They're good men, just a different generation, a different kind of fight." He turned to leave his movements slow, deliberate, his limp slightly more pronounced now. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the familiar ache of old age and the weight of a duty quietly fulfilled, a silent victory he carried alone. He walked towards the exit, the chime above the door, a soft counterpoint to the heavy silence he left behind, a silence now filled with the echoes of his impossible shot. The moment Thomas Hayes exited the range, the young soldiers erupted into a flurry of awestruck whispers and frantic questions. They surrounded Staff Sergeant Miller, their faces filled with disbelief and a desperate need for answers, a hunger for understanding. Rodriguez: "Sergeant, who was that guy? I mean, that's insane. He was shooting like a robot from 100 years ago. That's not even possible with a pistol like that." Jenkins: "No, seriously, Sergeant. Was he some kind of Special Forces legend? A sniper from, like, Vietnam or something? That's what that old pistol is, right? That's what they used in Nam." His voice was a mix of awe and desperate curiosity. Staff Sergeant Miller held up a hand, silencing them. His own mind was still reeling from the display. He had seen the precision. He had felt the silent authority emanating from the old man. He knew that kind of skill didn't just appear. It was forged in fire, in hardship, in an unrelenting pursuit of perfection, in a war that swallowed souls. He knew he had to find answers. He knew he had to understand the ghost. Miller: "All right, listen up. I don't know who he is, but that kind of shooting, that comes from somewhere deep, that comes from a place none of you have ever seen and none of you ever want to see." He walked to Thomas Hayes's target, retrieved it, and stared at the impossibly tight grouping, the single ragged hole in the bullseye. A silent testament to a mastery that transcended time and technology. He knew what he had to do. He knew he had to find the truth behind the legend later that day. Staff Sergeant Miller spent hours sifting through old military records, through classified archives, through veteran forums. He searched for Thomas Hayes, for M1911, for impossible accuracy, for Vietnam. The search was painstaking, frustrating a maze of redacted names and obscure references, a labyrinth of forgotten histories. But he was relentless. He knew that kind of skill didn't just exist in a vacuum. It had a history, it had a name, it had a purpose. He found it late that night, buried in a dusty online archive for retired Special Operations personnel. A grainy black-and-white photo of a younger Thomas Hayes, a man in his late 20s, early 30s, his face grim, his eyes sharp, holding an M1911 pistol. His uniform was dirty, his body lean, powerful. His presence, even in the faded photo, radiated a quiet intensity. The caption beneath the photo was sparse but chilling: "Thomas Ghost Hayes, U.S. Army, Special Forces, MACV SOG, Vietnam, 68 to 72, unofficial confirmed kills, 200 plus, unacknowledged missions, countless, known for uncanny precision and silent movement, disappeared after 72, classified indefinitely. Miller stared at the screen, stunned. Ghost. Hayes. A legend, a myth, whispered only in the darkest corners of military history, a man whose existence was barely acknowledged, a phantom who walked through war unseen. He was a living phantom, a master of silent warfare whose skills were almost supernatural, and he had just been laughed at in a suburban firing range by arrogant young recruits who knew nothing of the true cost of precision. The next morning, the atmosphere at the Fort Bragg firing range was palpably different. The youthful bravado had been replaced by a quiet reverence. The loud chatter had been replaced by hushed conversations about Ghost Hayes, about the old man, about the legendary shot. The young soldiers now approached their targets with a newfound seriousness, with a deeper understanding of what true marksmanship meant. They weren't just shooting anymore. They were seeking precision, seeking mastery, seeking the echoes of a skill they had seen demonstrated by a ghost. Staff Sergeant Miller now kept a framed copy of Thomas Hayes's target on his desk. The impossibly tight grouping a constant reminder of the level of skill that existed beyond their modern textbooks. He began to incorporate old-school techniques into his training drills, emphasizing fundamentals, precision, breath control, disciplines that had been almost forgotten in the age of rapid-fire suppression. He taught his men to shoot like Hayes, to think like the ghost, to seek the silent kill shot that transcended all technology. Thomas Hayes continued his quiet routine. His Wednesdays were still reserved for his trip to the Fort Bragg range. He still favored Lane, 7 tucked away from the main noise. He still loaded his M1911 with deliberate precision. He still fired his 10 shots with uncanny accuracy. But now the younger soldiers no longer laughed at him. They watched him in silent awe, their eyes filled with respect, their faces reflecting a profound understanding of his presence, a reverence that spoke louder than any words. Sometimes, after his 10 shots, he would look up and see a line of young soldiers standing quietly behind him, their faces solemn, their rifles lowered. They wouldn't speak, they wouldn't ask for a lesson, they would simply watch, absorbing the quiet wisdom emanating from his every movement, from every deliberate pop of his M1911. It was a silent education, a profound lesson in true mastery in the art of the ghost. He never sought recognition, never asked for thanks. He was content with his role as a silent teacher, a quiet guide, a beacon of forgotten wisdom for a new generation. He found a profound purpose in helping others understand the true meaning of skill, knowing that his own battles, his own ghosts, had found meaning in shaping the future of warfare, in guiding the next generation of silent protectors. His Tuesdays were still reserved for his physical therapy and his trip to Fresh Choice Market. He still pushed his cart down the cereal aisle, his gaze distant, his movements deliberate. No one at the market knew of his legendary past. No one at his quiet home knew of the profound impact he had on the lives of young soldiers. He was content with his anonymity, with the peace. He had earned a silent guardian forever walking among us, but sometimes when he felt the old ache in his back, when the stiffness in his knees reminded him of the jungles he had once crossed, he would subtly touch his right forearm, his fingers brushing over the faded, jagged scar. It was a silent conversation, a private reminder of battles fought and lessons learned, a silent testament to a life lived on the razor's edge. It was his mark, his history, his truth, a truth that now echoed through the hallowed halls of Fort Bragg, alive in the hearts of those he had helped to inspire, a testament to the power of quiet mastery, a timeless skill that transcended generations. Most people wouldn't have noticed the quiet old man at the firing range, but a whole generation of soldiers did, and now so do we. So I'll ask you, have you ever met someone like Thomas Hayes? Someone who served, who never asked for praise, who never told their story, but whose wisdom changed lives. Anyway, write their name in the comments. Tell us how they lived. Say the quiet things they never would, because they deserve to be remembered. And if this story touched you, subscribe to Intelligence Stories. We're here to make sure that men like Thomas Hayes are never invisible again. Their wisdom was earned. Now, it's time we speak for them. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, if you ever see an old man standing quietly in a store, a training ground, or a classroom, don't ask him what he's done. Just give him space because he's already done so much for us all.